In Elmira, New York. I am interviewing Samuel J. Danna, who was born December 28, 1918, and now lives at 805 Leland Street in Elmira, New York. My name is Tom Mailey, and I'm a volunteer with the Chemung County Historical Society. Mr. Danna was in the U.S. Army Air Force. He enlisted September 10, 1942, was separated September 20, 1945. While in the service, he achieved the rank of Technical Sergeant and served in the European Theater of Operations. And with that introduction, Mr. Danna, thank you for doing the interview with us. Tell me a little bit about why you went in the Air Force.
Well, I was given a choice, and I took the Air Force. Previous to that, I was drafted in the service. Okay.
So they actually drafted you?
Drafted me.
After you got drafted, you had a choice?
Yeah, and we went to Fort Niagara to take classification tests and everything. And they said, at that time you qualified for, and that was the first time they were using draftees in the Air Force. And I took the Air Force to whatever, assignment they had. And it ended up in they sent me to Lincoln, Nebraska. They had a school for the Air Force for the beginning training for aircraft maintenance and stuff like that. And that's the way it worked out.
Was that a choice? Did you want to do that when you went in the service?
Oh yeah, they said this is it had a list of about 18 different things in the Air Force. And I wanted, indicated I wanted to be a flight crew member and so forth. And that's when they sent me to the school in Lincoln, Nebraska, where they had that. And in fact, when I was there, I stayed on. It was 6 months, and I stayed on. I had a choice of being an instructor for 6 months, so I stayed on as an instructor. From there on in, we went to the Air Force, and we were going to be assigned to Troop Carrier Command, which is basically, logistically, it was haul supplies, and for combat purposes, drop paratroopers, as we did on D-Day and so forth. And that was a choice I made. Yeah.
Did you go through basic training?
Oh yeah, I went through basic training.
Where was that?
Lincoln, Nebraska. Yeah, that's
same place you went to.
Same, yeah, they worked that in. The Air Force. We had to do our basic training and go to school.
What was basic training like?
Well, it was out there where you basically a lot of it was physical to stay in shape and stuff like that. Marched and drilled, yeah, and it's odd. I was there in 1942, and they'd had the big drought out there, and unless I was looking at Lincoln, which is the capital of Nebraska, a beautiful city, I could look in any direction and never see one tree that was left from the big drought that they had out there.
Oh.
And they had jackrabbits around there, and that was the other thing too. When they wanted to physically work us out, try to capture a jackrabbit and so forth, and that was just blended in with our schooling from the mechanic schooling and so forth.
How long was the mechanic school?
That was 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, I was there 6 months and then stayed as an instructor for 6 months.
What did they teach you in the mechanic school?
Well, the basic function on the aircraft, the engines, maintenance and so forth, yeah. Fabric covering, whatever applied to that type of aircraft that you're going to be eventually working with. It turned out the aircraft we were working with Troop Carrier Command basically was for hauling logistics or hauling the paratroopers like we did on D-Day. We dropped them into combat, and it started D-Day. We took off on June 5th and dropped the paratroopers at 10 minutes to 1, same egg site rather, and And we learned everything there was to know about the aircraft. And
What kind of aircraft?
DC-3. Okay, that's the
old C-47?
C-47.
Tail dragger.
And we went right to the factory where they made them in Long Beach. And it was a very unique situation. We went up Signal Hill to go there from our basic training to go to school. You went up, and when you got on top of the hill, you looked down for this tremendous Douglas aircraft plant, and you didn't see a plant. You saw a golf course. The whole thing was camouflaged because it was right there on the coast. And when you come over the hill and you look down, there was a golf course. And under that there camouflage was the plant where they were putting all these planes together.
How do they camouflage it? How do they make it look like a golf course?
Well, they just covered it. They had netting all over. Yeah. Oh yeah, from the bird's eye view, you know, you get on top of the hill and then start down and look on the other side, and you look there and say, well, gee, you know, it looks like a golf course. And of course, being in an aircraft looking down at it, you know, they had even a more distant look. Yeah, it was perfectly camouflaged.
What was the capacity of the C-47 or the DC?
C-47 for the paratroopers was 18 men.
18?
18 men we dropped, yeah. And of course, the thing was, our job was when General Eisenhower was on our base on the 5th, and they said it's on because of a weather situation. And he was on our base, and it was photographed on our base, and saw, and in fact, the actual movie that the Army Air Force took of the president, well, he became president later on, General Knight, shows him on our air base waving at the paratroopers for good luck and everything else. And we dropped, we took off at 10 o'clock on the 5th, and we dropped them at 10 minutes to 1. Our batch of paratroopers, 101st Airborne at St. Merrill Egglesay, and 10 minutes to 1 in the morning. And that was the beginning of the thing. Previous to that, the people that had to work on the ground and set up the signals where to drop, they went in ahead of time, and we actually and it was a lot of confusion. It was dark. I think never again will they drop. The consensus, I've got a lot of books referring to the war, and these men are experts. They would consider never to drop them in the dark again, because there was so much darkness. When they hit the ground, the 82nd got mixed with the 101st, and each one of those units had different goals to achieve.
Yeah.
And the only thing they had to identify each other was a cricket. And when they'd see somebody, they'd hit the cricket and so forth. And the consensus after that was that they should have been dropped at dawn instead of doing it at night. But even then, they always question this and that. 10 minutes to 1 in the morning, that same day, St. Merrill Egglesay was what the 101st was to capture. That afternoon at 6 o'clock, they had captured it down. So the confusion was a confusion for the enemy as well as our troops when they hit the ground. Yeah.
Was that in France?
In France, yeah. And it's at the base of the Normandy Peninsula. And there was a crossroad supply, and they cut across there. The whole point was to cut across there to neutralize the Germans at the upper end of the peninsula and concentrate on getting it. And they did, they succeeded. And with all the confusion and everything, it worked out real well. General Eisenhower, later they said that, and then the weather turned bad for the the crafts in boats for landing the people, but the goal was achieved with our paratroopers in that same day, so it worked out. Uniquely enough, I got the book. Our casualties at that time was 2,000 men, and it was a lot more than that were wounded. So catastrophic. That wasn't the worst thing in the world. The British generals said that type of landing would result in a 60 to 70% casualties amongst the troops. And the fact of it is, it was only 16%. So it was successful from that standpoint too.
You mean that there'd be a lot of casualties just from dropping,
from dropping,
from the parachute, landing in trees or something.
And then of course, the Germans being ready, to slaughter everybody and everything. Yeah.
So what was your assignment after Lincoln? Where did you go from Lincoln or?
Well, this is it. Then we went to the training bases, of course, and.
Where were they?
Well, let's see. We went to the plant to see the planes made, and then we went to there was outside in Kentucky, and we were at an air base there, and they progressed, and we ended up our final training and executed drops in the Carolinas, and we actually dropped the paratroopers on maneuvers to see how things were going to work out. And
what was your role on the aircraft?
Well, my role, it was a flight engineer, was in the back of the plane with the paratroopers, and we had a set of switches that I had to confirm that they went on in case there was a failure in the lighting. And the pilot would put on the red, and that means in 2 minutes it's ready to go, and they'd hook up on us. And I had to confirm that. I said, the red light is on, and then confirm the fact that when the green came, everybody jumped out, and I had to confirm that. Sitting in the back of that plane. And
you never got caught up in the activity and ended up jumping
Well,
yourself?
no. The paratroopers would jokingly say, "Chief," they'd call you. We'd call crew chiefs and so forth. How about going out with us, and stuff like that? And I says, "You're going to need me." I says, "What do you mean by that?" Well, I says, "You're going to need supplies after you land." I says, "And God forbid, some of you might be hurt, and I'm going to bring you back." Oh, okay.
Were there ever people that were really reluctant to do this?
We had a couple of times, and the system was they'd go off to the side and follow their chute, and we'd take them back, and they were like under court-martial type of procedure. But what they did at that same day, some of them were accidentally, but others weren't. They just got frightened. They would take and gave them a chance that day. They took what they call a make-up mission. And any of these fellows that came back that same day, another plane would take all these guys that couldn't make it, for one reason or another, gave them a chance to go rather than have them court-martialed or shot.
Yeah, so it's defying an order, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, they got into the paratroopers voluntarily, didn't they?
Oh yeah. They did it. It was a thing there, just unbelievable. And of course, well, it was so nice. The British says, they're going to get hammered 70%. The actual fatality rate was 16%, which is very nominal for that time.
Why was it so different from what they predicted by the British?
Well, the British were they were a little contrary to what we were doing, and didn't think that timing was just right, and they predicted the one marshal that Eisenhower had to contend with, their British marshal, said they're going to have 60-70% casualties and so forth. And for a fact, it wasn't. As confused as we were when they hit the ground, the 82nd and 101st intertwined. They got scattered all over the countryside there. But even then, they achieved their goal, and the casualties, which includes the wounded, it was only 16%.
Why did they put the two different outfits in the same spot with different things to do? Why didn't they give one outfit two different goals?
Well, they did, but what happened, 2 or 3 mistakes were made. Let's see now how it worked out. On the ground, they called them the Pathfinders.
Mm-hmm.
They went in before we went in, and they would set up their radars so that signify the area, and there was confusion there, and which led to the total confusion, and then the shooting started and everything, and it really got fouled up. And people were landing in each other's lap practically and so forth, but with the confusion, the Germans were confused too. So
now
the
these
goal
guys,
was achieved
yeah.
in record time, and casualties was way down. They had a lot to be thankful for.
Now these guys the other outfit was also on C-47s.
Oh yeah,
Just took off from a different base or the same base?
The same base, and we flew 1,100 planes that day. You could have walked across the
I was going to
channel.
say, it's amazing.
On the way back, I'd swear that you could go from one plane to another.
No, it's a wonder there weren't more
Yeah.
air accidents.
Yeah.
I mean, just controlling that many aircraft and not having somebody jump out and land on another airplane or something.
It wasn't a lot written about it and so forth, but even then, like we say, we were confused, so were the Germans. So, and the casualties had to be a blessing.
What altitude do you drop at?
Basically 11 or 900 feet, from 11 or...
So you're not very high.
Not very high, no. They don't want any more time in the air in case they're spotted, and they start shooting at them,
And those were the days that they didn't have good radar on board
No,
for obstructions.
We had some problems, and they had problems with the crew on the ground. The Pathfinders had problems on location and everything, and this added to the confusion. But like I said, I got those books that tell you that through it all, success was achieved. They had worse luck on the beaches, with our boats and everything,
They were sitting ducks.
They were sitting ducks, and the tide came in and out,
Why was this an important place to capture?
Well, the St. Mailey Legbus say they want to neutralize all the fortifications north of that town, and that the peninsula there, we want to cross the base of it. So by cutting the crossroads off, you see, the Germans were isolated up there, and they couldn't get themselves involved in what was going to be the battle on the beachheads. The Omaha, Utah beachheads was adjacent to St. Mailey Legbus site.
Oh, I see.
You see?
So this was just prior to
Yeah, and this was right prior to it. And that neutralized all those forces by capturing that town and everything from come on down and getting into the battle on the beaches, see?
Uh-huh.
That was it, and it worked. It worked, yeah.
Did capturing that town tip the Germans off to what was coming next?
Oh, I don't know. It became apparent to them how important it was. It worked out, and it saved a lot of lives on the beaches too.
What was the stall speed of the 47?
The what?
The stall speed. How far?
Yeah, the stall speed on the 47, you could take it, not loaded, you could take it and still fly and maintain the direction at 90 or 100 miles an hour, almost like a glider. Yeah,
it's amazing.
It was a beautiful plane. And later on, of course, they built the C-46, which was a bigger plane. It was by Curtis Wright up in Buffalo. And, well, we got them here in our museum, the C-46. And they were going to use them because of the limited capacity, the 47. But what we used one group was made up of C-46s, and we used them in the last Paratroop Invasion when we dropped them over the Rhine, and they had one group. And lo and behold, being the 46 was such a powerful plane and everything like that, they had hydraulic assist system in all their control systems, which meant all the way to the back of that plane. And they made them, when they got shot up, hydraulic fluid catches on fire and everything. Took an awful beating. They took an awful beating.
Wow.
Oh yeah, they could take and handle twice as many troops as we did, you know, and much more power than we had too. But at the same time, it was very costly.
Yeah.
Being that close to the ground, they couldn't take as much as a 17 and keep, a 47 and still keep flying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the idea was there, of course, that's why they took the 47s and flew them back. They were going to keep them and then work their way to the other end of the war, you know, and to finish against the Japs. And they decided they didn't have the capacity and fuel capacity even. So they were going to take and use the 46s, but it didn't end up, we didn't need them anyway, so. Yeah.
What was the range of the 47 as far as point to point? I mean, could you stay in the air 2 hours?
Yes, we take and put Furrion tanks. We'd supplement the tanks. We had 800 gallons, 4 on either wing, 400, and then we would take and put another 2 Furrion tanks, which give us another 400 gallons to make those 10 and 11-hour flights that we made going across the ocean.
Wow.
Those were Furrion tanks that we used. And you couldn't use them, of course, in the combat.
Yeah.
They'd be deadly. Yeah.
Did you go, how'd you go across over the top?
No, we went to the southern route.
Did you?
Oh, yeah. We took off from Florida.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we landed in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
And from Puerto Rico, then we hit the spot there down by the Amazon at Belém. And Belém, Brazil, and Natal, Brazil, is where we took off, and we went to the island out there. What was the name? The spacemen used to use it too.
Oh yeah, okay.
Oh gosh, yeah, and yeah, with that type of stuff, we could stay in here 11 hours with those ferries.
How many crews do you need for 11 hours? I mean, you can't
The
use
same crew.
same pilot and co-pilot?
Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah, and we'd have a navigator in that case too, you know, because they shoot the stars once you left the coastlines and the islands, and when they crossed, oh my goodness, I'm trying to think of the name of that island, but
I'm afraid I can't either.
Yeah.
Where were you stationed in Europe? Where was the base?
Well, we went. Of course, our first place was west of London, and Greenham Commons, and that's where our air base. There's a little town called Newbury at the bottom. Had this Greenham Commons, and this is where Ike met the troopers, and we started D-Day, and so that was west of London, right on a beeline, about 40 miles, and when the Germans were using those pilotless things,
Drones.
and when there was a good tailwind, every now and then one would make it out toward our area, you know, and we'd hear it or something like that, and then later on you'd look and then you'd see some farmer got himself a new drive. Wasn't a drive,
Freighter.
Yeah, you had a well built out there, and that's where the buzz bomb ended up with a tailwind.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was that where you were stationed during the whole time in the European theater?
No. Then we moved to we moved right into France.
Where in France?
We were at Amiens, and in fact, at the end of the war, We were at Reims.
Yeah.
General Ike. We went to town where it was winding down, and some of the people in town, they said, "Holy mackerel!" He said, "Guess what?" He says, "Well, he's talking to the MPs." He says, "It was a German staff car came in, and this was in April, and they says with white flags on it, so they come in to surrender." See? Yeah, Reims. Yeah, it's that was quite a town. Yeah.
How many missions?
We had classified as combat, 33 missions we had.
No, there was no limit at those days. I mean, you flew until you went home, or I mean, someday you didn't have 25 missions and you're done.
Yeah. Well, that was, see, at the beginning. Now, later on, when they had the protection for those guys, we had this neighbor of mine, Dick Hoffman. He was a flight engineer on a B-17. He came home after 25 missions. He was on them when they didn't have the electrical heating things. They'd have gunners in the outer reaches, tail gunner and stuff like that. They'd go and take them out. They froze to death while they were in the plane until, and he came home after 25 missions. Yeah. And later on, it was up to 45 missions before you would come home, because then they had the, heated suits and better protection and so forth. Yeah.
Were you with the same crew during the whole war?
Yeah, and it's the same one. In fact, I chose to come home under the point system, and the war ended, you see, and the generals came in there, and we heard about it, and they signed the surrender, and right after that, they had a point system. So based on the months and the types of mission and everything like that, I qualified to come home, and of course it wasn't going to be the end of the war, and it was going to be the interlude, then we'd have to take care of Japan and so forth. So I chose to come home under the point system, and I was in the first consignment of that, I could have walked home faster than they got us home. They put us on trains, and we were in boxcars in France, we were getting up to the coast and so forth. And then they put us on a boat, USS Aiken, Victory boat, that was used to haul supplies, and they converted it to take it back, the men, and they overloaded it by 600 people, and you'd have a bunk for 24 hours and no bunk for another 24 hours. And I swear I could have walked home faster. We, by the time they got us out of the channel, and then we hit open seas, and right after we hit open seas, we got into real rough seas, and air sickness and seasickness is the same thing. And the poor guys that were part of the infantry who was going home and so forth, they were terribly sick. They couldn't even go to dinner, And they offered one time, right in the middle of it, they only showed up, 300 people showed up for dinner at the height of the storm, the fourth day of the storm, out of the possible 1,300 that was on that boat. God. And anybody shows up will get a half a chicken, I didn't have a great appetite, but I did get airsick because it was just like seasick. Air sickness and seasickness is the same thing. But I felt so sorry for those guys. They lost a lot of weight those 4 or 5 days. It was something, yeah.
What else did you have in the aircraft besides troops that you were dropping?
Well, we would take, we could load 2 Jeeps.
Really?
Yeah, we could put 2 Jeeps on there. We had loading ramps. We'd take 2 Jeeps and bring them up to where they needed Jeeps and so forth.
They were all side loaded though, right?
Side loaded. We had ramps and everything that we just put them in the back of the thing and run them suckers right up in there, yeah. And you had to make sure you tied them down good and so forth. Yeah, we took everything. The worst thing we took is when the Pat would outrun the transportation of fuel. Then they would be at the front, and that was a touchy mission too. It was terrible too. 5-gallon jerry cans, those heavy metal jerry cans. We put hundreds of them on, and I'm trying to hold them down with a rope. and we had these here places where you could tie them down. It was a real risky business, and it was very tedious getting them on and getting them off, and you get to all that vapor stuff, you know, and slush it in a thing like that, and Patton's men would be waiting there, you know.
Was that in North Africa?
No,
No.
this is still in Europe.
Oh, in Europe?
Oh yeah, he'd outrun the supply, you
Yeah.
know. They couldn't get in there with the tankers, and we'd have to fly in there to keep them going. Yeah.
Were 47s pressurized at that point?
No,
I didn't think so.
It wasn't pressurized. And just the unique thing about the DC-3, first one that ever flew, American Airlines, and we got the history. The schooling that we got at the Douglas plant was just beautiful. They had it wasn't military personnel. They showed us everything about that airplane. And they told us the story. American Airlines wanted a transport plane for hauling passengers. And the first one that ever flew, they built for that purpose, was 1935. And when American Airlines checked it, and then they had to put on the equivalent to the passenger's weight and luggage on that plane, the first one they built, and fly it over the Rockies, cut one engine off, and see if it could still fly. And it did. It did. And then that's why it was built in the first place. And then later on, we took it on, you know, for handling paratroopers. And that plane is still flying today.
Really?
Oh yeah, that's still flying. That's the only plane. There will never be another plane that was designed and flew for the first time in 1935. And I don't mean that original plane is still flying, but the 47s that were left, yeah, they're still. Well, I used to go down until recently when I lost my wife to go down to Florida. I still see DC-3s flying down there in Florida, and the countries in South America like that.
Yeah.
Still use the old C-47.
Oh, I flew on one in the Korean War, and
In
Europe.
Oh yeah, they're still around here.
But
And
we
there.
had C-119s too, and the 119s is.
Oh yeah, with the boom in the
tail,
back, and this is where this is what
you
they
could put
use
a
now.
small
for the
city in there.
Yeah, that's what they use the paratroopers too. You know, coming off in the back of them things.
Oh yeah.
An army of them.
Did your plane ever come under fire?
Oh yeah, we were hit 4 times.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Ever shot down?
No, not shot down, and they, believe it or not, toward the end of the war, the Germans had their flak. They didn't have anything that would operate only at high altitudes for the 17s, and they developed it. And we went into when we had the bridge too far, and they were the British made the mistake of going in there and trying to get into Holland. And what was it? They wanted to get in there. The Germans still had right there toward the end. They had the pens there for the submarines, and then they also had the flak drones that fly over London and so forth. And they wanted to knock them out. And General Montgomery there, he chose to go in there, and he went in there with 8,000 men, and some of the guys got back swimming across the river there, and 6,400 were captured. The total dilemma. We took the bridges at Remagen and Eindhoven, and that was our job to do. And
They're in Germany?
this was in France.
In France.
Yeah. General Montgomery, I never realized it. I thought, quite a few of them was killed. I knew some were swimming back, but then I read it as 6,400 surrendered.
Wow.
They had nothing. And they tried to resupply them with B-24s. The B-24 guys, our pilot knew a B-24 pilot when he went up to his base, was shot up going in at a low altitude, you know, and that's a bum deal going in there that low, you know. They're used to, you know, driving them from way up in the air and stuff like that. Yeah, that whole thing was a shame because they didn't achieve anything at all. We maintained the bridges we were supposed to hold. You know, it was two of the Eindhoven was another one at that same time, and that kept the Germans from bringing their reinforcements through there. They received their goal, but they didn't. The main force didn't make out. In fact, they lost it all, except for a couple thousand, maybe or less, swam across it, and escaped at night. You know?
How many planes were in your squadron?
Well, each squadron had 20 planes.
20 planes?
Yeah.
Were you assigned to a specific paratroop unit or?
438 troop carrier group. Yeah, and they.
So you got to know these guys pretty well.
Oh yeah, and it became the lead group for D-Day. Our group was the lead.
Really?
Yeah, we went in there. Pathfinders did go in earlier, you know, and but for dropping the paratroopers was the lead group in our squadron. It was the lead squadron, and that was what a mix-up they had there. But it worked out. When I read the book and I said, "Gee," I said, "they achieved it," and you know, and they lost a couple thousand men, and the British said, "You're going to lose 2/3 of your men," you know, 60%. And we were confused, but the Germans were more confused than we, so that worked out.
Did you lose any close friends in combat?
Oh.
Or any people you knew well?
We've lost, well, yeah, we've lost personnel, but some were in combat, but a lot of them are just in the training. We had the unpleasant occurrence on the base, for instance, in the training procedure. We had, well, that one case we'd been on a, what you call it, supply mission, and we landed and we were almost back to the base and we heard this awful noise, and it was two 17s. I had an overcast of 3,000. See, we flew under 3,000 feet. See, and they were letting down on the overcast to get in there, and one ran into another. So with those two planes there, they lost 19 men, and at the same time we were taking a maneuvering, getting ready with a British Horsa glider, a Mammoth glider, and it took twice as many. With the pilot on a Horsa, I told you 3 people.
Really?
Oh yeah, Mammoth thing.
Were they the ones they snatched off?
Hmm?
They snatched them off they pulled them off from a plane that was already in the air?
Not we could, but not the Horsa. You couldn't do the Horsa, and it turned out, we were on maneuvers only, and we got 2 of ours in the morning, and they were pulling them in the afternoon, and geez, Oliver looked up there, and the guy said, "Oh my God, look!" And the tail fell off of one of them. And this was within 7 days. Within the 7 days, the 17s was casualties. Within that 7 days, the Horsa glider crashed in the woods. 33 men.
That's tall. That's too bad. Where were you discharged from?
Let's see now. That was. Let's see. When it came back, I finally. That was another foul up. Ended up. They processed us in the Air Force, and they sent us down to Warrenburg, Carolina, and then all at once they said, "Well, we got all the papers and and of course at that time it was the U.S. Army Air Force. Go to Fort Dix." So we went to Fort Dix and finally got our discharge. Yeah.
Did you go in the reserves at all after you got out?
No.
So you were discharged and that
was it. Yeah.
Have you stayed in touch with anybody that was in the service?
Oh yeah, we took and we had a memorial now. We 40th anniversary on D-Day. We went to the U.S. Army Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio.
Right.
The largest warplane museum in the world. and they have memorial grounds, the 8th and 9th Air Force, and you have to, you got to follow their criteria, and we put that in behalf of the men that we lost during the war, and we dedicated that, and at that time we were all civilians and went there with our wives and everything like that, and spent a couple of days, and that museum is just unbelievable.
Really?
Oh yeah, you just can't comprehend it, because when we went in there, they showed us the official Army Air Force film of D-Day, and it shows that, you know, Eisenhower at our base congratulating the 101st and the 82nd, and then being in the control tower. Yeah, and you take, and it's so large. If you want to see all of the planes that are stored there, you get on a bus and go out.
Really?
Acres.
That's great.
Acres of them. Tremendous outfit. What a thing. And then at a level for the memorials, just beautifully done. And we dedicated a memorial to the personnel that we lost at the 40th anniversary.
Do you stay in touch with any of your friends?
Well, we did. You know, each squadron had their own group, and have a reunion, you know, every year and so forth. And now it's down to where, for the group, and that includes the ground executive group and like that. And now it's down to about 70 people or like that, and most of them are widows that are surviving them that died. Down to, you know, we're gone.
What did you do in your free time over in Europe when you were off?
Well, you know, being a married man and everything like that.
Oh, you were married when you went off?
I was married. See,
Oh.
I was married before, and before the war started, of course, and right after that it started. And my thing that amazed me, I go out, for instance, talk to people, and I was worked in the Eli Lilly plant. They make medicines and chemicals and stuff like that. They have no summer vacation when they go to school. And in 8 years, when you go to school in England, it's equivalent to our 12-year education we have here.
Holy mackerel.
It never gets too hot in England.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that one time before we moved to Europe, and they says, hey, you want to enjoy the summer, it's going to be 80 degrees in Brighton Beach, it's on the southern coast. He said, we have 3 days of summer, otherwise you never get too sweaty in England.
That's great.
Yeah. But it's phenomenal. See, they do not. They do not. When 8 years is equivalent to our 12-year education. No summer vacation.
No.
You go to school 12 months out of the year. Yeah. And I said, geez, that's fantastic, you know. And then they have a situation I see where one of the potential kings there, he finished at a certain level, and then before you commit yourself to the higher education, you take a year off.
Good idea.
Yeah, you take a year off and decide what you want to do. But I talked to that personnel, and it was that worked at the Eli Lilly, the pharmaceutical company, and I said, that was amazing. I said, that is something. But they do it in 8 years.
Did you get a chance to do any sightseeing over there in Europe, or?
Oh yeah, the best thing that happened in Europe, we went to the invasion of southern France. So that meant we went to Italy. My brother Leonard was in the infantry with the 85th Division, and under General Clark's men and so forth. And there's a boy, Leonard was 18 years old, April, his birthday's 26th, yeah, April 26th. He turned 18 years old, and that June, he graduated Southside High School. And that August, they drafted him in the service. And inside of a month or two, he was shipped, and he sat in the harbor trying to get off in a boat. And the Germans and Italy was wiping out Mussolini at that time, changing, and the Germans were taking and bombing our resupply boats and everything in the harbor in Naples, and my kid brother was in Naples at that time. You know, barely 18 years and 4 or 5 months old, getting shot at, you know.
Oh my God.
So when we went there for the invasion of southern France, he came down and seen me. In fact, thought I had it somewhere. Yeah, we spent some time together one day. He went to the intelligence office, asked where our outfit was, and they told him exactly where I was, and then he, well, in fact, here's the picture we took in Italy right here. This is my kid brother and I. Yeah, and that's and I was there on the base, and he saw me there, and then later on, that wasn't my plane, incidentally, but the girl up on top. At the airport, the Warplane Museum up there, they're transferring that to make it a C-47, which is right here in the middle of it, you know. And we took this picture, you know, years later. Well, was it 40-some years later? Because this was taken in, what did I say, 44? Yeah, toward the end of the war, in 1944. And we took this picture up there, and we'd hoped to take it with the one that they're converting this plane to a C-47, and 7, 8 years, and it's been set aside, and we were supposed to get up there and get another picture taken, but it'll never be with this because they're right in the middle of it, and they have been 7, 8 years, and they didn't do anything. Now I see they're not going to call it a warplane museum anymore.
No, I see they're going to Wings of Eagle. Or
so we'll never see it, because we want to add from this. We want to add the one with this plane is that plane there originally, you know, and so we would cover that time from 1944 right up to 2004, our last picture. But we might take a picture up there.
Did you ever go back to Europe to visit?
No.
My wife thought about it.
My wife, no, I talked about it, and they had the anniversaries at one time too, where each group, you know, had their reunion groups, and we went to those in the statewide. And I said to my wife, and I said, oh no, and of course we didn't have any children before the war, and after the war we're looking about, holy mackerel, we're going to adopt children, and then it turned out she had a tumor on an ovary, and so we're going to adopt some children here and there. We had papers from Canada and all over, and lo and behold, we started our family. So we ended up with 6 children, but it was 5 girls in a row.
Really?
And I said to Marge, gee, I said, you don't have to prove anything to me. Oh no, she says, we're going to have that boy. It was the last thing. And sure enough, the same doctor, Dr. James Mark, delivered all the girls, and then she was pregnant for the 6th one, and the last time she was 41 years old.
Wow.
And he called me in, and he said, yeah, I want to tell you. And then he says, you've got a boy. So what do you think of that? I said, well, you knew before me. I said, what do you? He says, I was astounded.
What did your wife do while you were overseas?
She worked she went to live, that was the other thing, then she went home and lived with her mother, you know. And she worked in the store. She worked, I don't know if you recall, Astor Candy Store.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, she worked there
for
years and everything like that, and she'd always send me my stuff. I was a candy man in my squad, and the fellas would come in, and I'd be working different hours. Hey, Danna, you know where it is. Don't wake me up. She kept a supply with candy. She'd work overtime and not take the pay, and she'd take the pay in candy. Yeah.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah. So I was a candy man overseas. Yeah.
How did being in the service affect your life after the service? How do you think it was different, having been in the service and did what you did?
Well, I think you appreciate everything.
Yeah.
Everything that's good, you know.
Did it affect what you did for a living after you got out?
Well, I went to school with got a CAA license in aircraft and engine mechanics, and I didn't apply it because every place I went, they demeaned the license, and they said, "Well, we come to find out," and that which bothers me to this day. But I guess our record is pretty safe. One in many areas, and now in fact they did away with civil aeronautical licensing. But when it was they had to have it. One licensed mechanic could have 9 people that weren't licensed, and he'd supervise their work and made it legal. And that's the training I went for. And all these places were out of town, you know, and so forth. And they took on the position right away. Well, we don't care about the license, you know. That just burned me. So I never went to work for.
What did you do for a living, then?
Well, I worked at an artistic card company. I was working there, and I was traffic manager in the end, and. What else? I was an inventory control man. I wore about 4 hats. 27 years, and the original family was wonderful. And
was that the Feidelmans?
Feidelmans, of course. Then Stu Comer took it over.
Right.
And when he took it over, my wife says, "We got to make sure of something." And I bought the old gas station and the pharmacy in Pennsylvania Avenue, the medicine shop.
Oh yeah,
that was our
South Avenue, and
that was our pizzeria and sub shop. See?
Was it really?
Yeah, and my wife says, I don't go for that, Mr. Culver's, and sure enough, it took him 7 years to bankrupt the company, and that was it. My career was over there, but I had a very good job. I was a traffic manager. I wore 2 or 3 hats there, yeah. And by that time, of course, we had the business running, so I finished my career with my wife. But I always tell the kids, I say, we had it easy. I says, we only had 6 of you, I says, and we retired early. I says, I was 72, and your mother was going to be 70. I says, and we had it made in the end. I says, we were only working 60 hours a week, 66 instead of 84. And the kids are looking at me, and he said, "What are you getting at?" I said, "You people want to retire when you're 58? You don't want to work over 40 hours a week, you know?" And I was kind of belittling the situation. And I says, "We never thought any more of, just doing it. We did it." So,
did any of the kids go out in the service?
No.
Do you talk
had
about
the
it?
one boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they sent them all to college, every one of them. Yeah, there's 5 girls and a boy. He's up there with the AIG, the investment company up there in Schenectady. He works for them. Yeah, and the girls all got their careers, and a couple were school teachers. Yeah.
Did the kids work in the business with you?
They of course the older ones, would help on a weekend or something. They got married and were out of town. Yeah, I'd say the ones. They really were in there because they were so young. They had a longer career. Was my youngest daughter and my son. He was the youngest of them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they helped all the way.
A true family business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Do you have anything you want to add to this tape before we finish? I think we've covered a lot of stuff, and if we left anything out, or is there something I've not asked you about that you'd like to put on the?
No,
record? You certainly have had a wonderful career, and both in the service and outside the service.
Yeah, I just think today, the way things are with the people and what their outlook and everything, it kind of bothers me. When you read the statistics in the paper, And you see, we got 20,000 people or better that get shot every year with guns, one way or another, in this country. And we have 26, 27,000 die from car accidents, and a lot of them are from drinking and taking drugs and stuff like that. And it bothers me mostly. We have potentially so many things that should be a lot less of.
Yeah.
And I tell my children now, and of course they're all grown up and everything. I said I just can't believe we're creating more. I says destruction than we did at loss in the war.
Yeah.
For a fact, it's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
I don't understand our so-called society now. It's tough.
It's very different than when you and I were
Oh
living.
yeah, this is too many minuses there. They're just I just can't believe it. Self-inflicted.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
A little lack of self-discipline in some cases.
Yeah.
Let me get Heather, and then maybe we'll lay out some of that stuff on the table if we can, and we'll take a picture of that, and then we'll be done. I think we're set. Yeah, it was really good. I think it must be just about an hour.
How are you doing?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Yeah. Okay, that's on the anniversary of the 40th D-Day. This is a picture of the memorial we put up for the our fellow airmen who gave up their lives in their behalf. This is at Dayton, Ohio, the big U.S. Air Force Museum.
Okay. How about this picture?
This here is an ID thing, and I guess it was in a newspaper. The personnel office sent it back home. They put this in the Star Gazette, and there's a copy of the material that our squadron sent to the local paper during the war.
Okay. How about this?
Oh, this is the initial one for the Air Medal for doing the for this particular one that I got the Air Medal and 4 leaf clovers for D-Day. Okay, and this picture here, I witnessed the 101st Airborne. This is the 101st Airborne. General Eisenhower was on our base at Greenland Commons in England that day, and that night we took off at 10 o'clock. He was in our control tower, and this picture was taken, and they were in a secured area adjacent to where our squadron was. And I seen him actually when he was talking and congratulating the 101st Airborne, and that's a copy of that picture that I've seen. It was in in one of the local papers afterwards. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about this?
Well, this again is for the Air Medal.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got equivalent to 5 of them, I guess.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
How about this?
Yeah. This is a duplication of the medals and what we had done before.
Can you explain this one?
Yeah, this picture here, originally, this is the one that my brother and I took in Italy in 1944, and on our air base north of Rome. And 40 years later, we took the picture of the aircraft, DC-3, that they're converting to a troop carrier plane at the Warplane Museum,
That's great.
which is still in process.
Okay. And what's this newspaper?
This was in
clipping?
the paper, yeah, recalling the longest day. It's one of the anniversaries. And this was a picture that our squadron people had sent to the paper. And it's a picture of myself and the pilot and co-pilot and the radio man was taken overseas during the war.
Okay. Wonderful. And then this is a copy of your discharge?
That's a copy of the discharge, yeah.
Okay. Wonderful.